Today I'm going to talk about a heel turn and specifically an emphasis on the gap that is created while working the short row heel turn. I have a little cheat sock here to show you that this is the section right here that I'm working on. I've already worked the heel flap and now I'm going to begin my short rows and work until I've completed that whole section, which is this turquoise section here. So the first row of the heel flap, which is all the rows of the heel flap are worked back and forth, but the first row you work 18 stitches. I'm on the purl side, and some patterns do it the right side, some do it the wrong side. I start with the wrong side. I've purled 18 stitches, and now I'm going to purl 2 together and purl 1, which is my first row of the heel turn. And that's what creates the gap, where I've left my stitches behind, and now I'm going to turn my work and do the next row with the stitches here. I'm going to slip 1 and knit 5. Now I'm going to knit 2 through the back loop. You could do an SSK, any left leaning decrease. Knit 2 through the back loop, knit 1, and now I have an additional gap. So now I have a gap on this side and a gap here. The gap is created because we're working additional rows on the middle stitches, and the ones on the left and the right are left behind. They don't get worked, so they're lower, creating the gap. When working the short row heel, the decrease is worked across that gap. So in my pattern, I refer to working 1 stitch before the gap, and this is what I'm talking about, that gap right here. Sometimes it helps to see if you pull it down or pull them really stretched out. Now I'm going to slip the first stitch again. I always slip the first one and purl till 1 stitch before that gap. So here I am, 1 stitch before the gap. I'm going to purl the 2 together across the gap, which closes it up. Then I'm going to take a new stitch and purl it, leaving the rest behind, creating a new gap. The next row again, I'll slip 1 and work 1 stitch before the gap. You can see my gap right here. There's my gap. I'm going to knit 2 together through the back loop, closing up the gap, and then knit 1. A way to check yourself to make sure you're on the right track is if you finish a right side row, and then you can count your stitches that have been left behind. Here's my gap, here's my gap. So I should have the same number of stitches on either side of the outside edge of those gaps. Here I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. That means I'm on the right track. Completing the second row, which in this case is the knit row, will result in the same edges because you will have worked the same number of rows, wrong side and right side. Again, I'm going to turn my work, slip the first stitch, and work to 1 stitch before that gap. There it is. Purl the 2 together, closing up that gap, purl 1, leaving behind a new gap. And here once again, there's my gap. I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before the gap. Here's my gap. Purl 2 together through the back loop, or I'm sorry, knit 2 together through the back loop, and knit 1. Once again, here's my gap, and then here's my gap. Through the magic of video, I've gone ahead and worked several more rows. I'm now nearing the end. I've got 3 stitches on the outside and 3 stitches on the outside of either side of my gaps. And once again, here's the gap. You can see the cup that's being created. I've got my decreases lined through here and decreases lined through here, and it gives that nice little cup shape. So I have a few more rows to work, and I'm going to mention here that the last 2 rows will not have that extra purl 1 and knit 1, and that's okay because that means we've worked all of our stitches. So let me get across here. I'm at near the end. I'm on row 3 and row 4 from the last of the 4 rows that I have to knit. So I hope that makes sense. Purling to 1 stitch before that gap. Sorry about that, my husband just walked in. So I'm purling to 1 stitch before the gap, purl 2 together, purl 1. So now I've only got 1 stitch left on this side. Slip 1 and knit to 1 before the gap. And then I've got the gap over here, so I've got quite a ways to go. Purl 2 together across that gap, knit 1, and I have 1 stitch left. Now these are the 2 rows that will not have that extra purl or knit row. They're worked exactly the same with that exception. Slip 1, purl 2 together, which will close up this last gap. So now I will have no stitches left unworked on that side, and here's my last gap right here. Slip 1, I just skipped ahead here, make it a little quicker. So I'm knitting to that gap. I have 1 stitch left on the other side of the gap here. I'm gonna knit those 2 together through the back loop. And now all of my stitches are worked. I have my cup for the heel here. It's a very nice little shape. Again, here are all my purl 2s together because they're done on the wrong side, and my knit 2 through the back loop, which are done on the right side. Give you a closer look at that. And I have 18 stitches left, and now I'm ready to pick up for my gusset. I hope that answered any questions that you have about the gap. Thank you.